And so a farmer will look at all of his options and retain all those considerations, I guess, and decide what fits in me. And many of our irrigated acres, they're in crop every year because they cannot be set aside. They're just too expensive. So they'll grow something every year. We had people growing malting barley on the same piece of ground 30 years in a row. And
hey guys, it's Mandy with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
I just want to keep drumming to that when it plays. But hello, Dave, and hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining. I see there's quite a few on. Please let us know where you're coming in from. And also, if any questions come up, I really encourage you guys to drop them into the chat. We'll try to get to them. And definitely after this, we'll make sure that we respond. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to holler. I'm excited about today's conversation because Dave is not a veteran, for say, in the hemp industry. He's been around for a long time, but came from another industry that definitely coincides and relates side by side with what we're doing. And so I'm excited to really talk to Dave about his background and experience in farming and agriculture, but for different crops and where hemp fits into those rotations and how they align. So before we do, I want to say thank you very much to all of our sponsors. Our fiber data and our trial data is coming out and being pretty exciting. There have been a lot of questions about how to find information and how to get connected to data. All of our sponsors, because our trials were funded entirely this go around by our sponsors are receiving all of the trial data at the end of this month, end of October, beginning of November, depending on harvest dates and what we're going to see come back in over the next couple of weeks. So if you guys are interested in sponsoring or getting involved, please let us know. Also, as members and sponsors of GHA, we would love your feedback about what you'd like to see in next year's trials. We are writing protocols right now, so I encourage you guys to give us a shout out, let us know. We'll be sure to get the information included and, really taking into consideration where market is, where it's both pulling from demand as well as our farm and need on the ag side. So with that, Dave, I'd love to turn it over to you and hear a little bit about who you are and where you came from, what your background is in this space. And I'll turn the floor over.
Okay, cool. My name is Dave Tweet. I'm pretty much a native Montanan, but not completely. I was born in Minnesota, came out here when I was a very small child, grew up in Montana, north central Montana, and got involved in the ag business and pretty much is in the ag business in Montana all my career. And I handled, to begin with, many different crops: wheat, barley, lentils, whatever there was, durum. We handled it through our grain elevator system. But probably the last half of my career, I worked for Anheuser Busch, sourcing malting barley for our breweries. And that's really kind of a parallel, I think anyway, to what the hemp industry is doing. We felt as though we needed to supply our breweries with the best barley that we could find, high quality, consistent supply. And to do that, we initiated a contract program. And that's what I did my entire career. We sourced seed. We worked with growers, the same growers year in, year out, to grow the seed, to supply our contractors to grow the malting barley, and then ship it off to our malt houses. And then the malt houses, of course, ship to the breweries. And the way we did that was we contracted right now, this time of the year, August, September, for the next crop, 2023 crop. to make sure we got the right varieties in the ground, the best growers, the best areas, good amounts, so we could assure our supply. And then we took it in and we stored it and used that in the next year. And that's similar to what I think the hemp industry is going to do or is doing right now. And we can talk about that in a minute. But since then, I've since retired, and I am working for the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee as a consultant just to promote agriculture in general. And not certainly full-time, just something to get me out of the house, keep me from having to vacuum all the time. So I do that, and I see hemp as a rotation crop for our wheat and barley growers. We grow 8 million acres of cropland of crop in Montana every year, and most of that is wheat and barley of some sort. And hemp has to fit in there somehow to be a rotation. That's how I see it anyway. So
Hey, talk to me
I
about
kind of
this.
wandered all over there, but anyway, that's
right.
what I do.
I've got some questions, all kinds of questions to talk about. So I hope that our sound is okay. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, and we weren't earlier, so I hope that Dave, you can hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So you said how hemp fits into that rotation somehow. Can you talk to me about a couple of things? One, when you talk about contracts for farmers, right? What do farmers need? What are we looking for in order to make hemp or to fit hemp into that rotation? And how is it fitting into that rotation? Is it, what are we seeing? Is it, every year, every other year, quarterly? Are they doing small field, big field? Yeah, I'd like to kind of dive into the details of.
Okay, I'll probably lose the gist of your question because I thought of something I should have brought up. But the reason people forward contract, of course, the end user, in my experience at Anheuser Busch, wanted to assure a supply, and so that was their benefit. The grower, almost every grower I know, has to go to the bank to get an operating loan. Bankers don't like risk. So if there's a forward contract, they can see that the crop is already priced at an acceptable level. They can make some money. They can buy insurance for crop failures. The bankers really like that. So that's the benefit for the farmer. Then all they have to do is go out and farm. They just do what they'd like to do. So that's the real benefit of forward contracting. It benefits the end user and it benefits the farmer. So that's really an important key, and I'm going to probably pound on that because that's what I think the hemp processors and people who make stuff out of hemp, they need to understand that and get on board. We felt it as though it was a partnership, and that's what I think the hemp industry has to view it as well. The person in wherever, New York, who's making something out of hemp grown in Montana, they're connected, and they have to have each other's best interests, at least not in heart maybe, but certainly in mind. And I told you I'd lose your question. So what?
That's right. We're talking about the farm forward contracts for farming and what farmers are looking for. What do they need to be secure? And I want to touch on this because I've seen it also, and somebody else mentioned the benefit of those forward contracts have helped these smaller farmers stay out of bankruptcy.
That's right.
Because like you said, they're then able to use them to leverage themselves to be able to be successful or add additional crops or get additional equipment that's needed. And so I go back to that as well.
And I will say this: the farmers right now have, well, first of all, in Montana we can plant winter wheat, which is already seeded now. That's about 40% of our wheat crop. About 60% of our wheat crop is spring wheat, which is planted in the spring. Many other crops are planted in the spring, including hemp and including many other crops that are forward contracting. So the farmer has many, many choices of crops to forward contract. All of those crops have more of a history, if you will, than hemp. Hemp is the new kid on the block. We can get data on what chickpeas do north of Great Falls, for instance. We can get data on durum yields in a dry year. We have all those traditional crops. And hemp, we have very little growing information. That's why your plots, that plot work you guys are doing is tremendous, really important. And IND here is doing a lot of that as well. But there are many crops that a farmer has to choose from right now, forward contracting.
There's a question really quick on when is winter wheat harvested in Montana?
Pardon me? I was reading a question there.
That's all right. When is winter wheat harvested in Montana?
Oh, you're right. Winter wheat is seeded now. It has to, winter wheat's an interesting crop. It needs to germinate and come up out of the ground a little bit in the fall of the year and then go dormant as it freezes. And then it will be harvested in Montana probably in late July and in August. If you plant winter wheat in the spring of the year, it'll come up, it'll get green, but it lays down, you can't harvest it, it can't happen. So
interesting.
It doesn't make a crop.
Interesting. Great question, Tony. Thank you very much. And Tim had a good comment, just basically talking about or saying what you did. The contract has asset value. It can be used as collateral to secure working capital and ease cash flow. And I think this is really important. Again, going back to it's critical for its vibrant market, right? And in order for us to be successful, we've got to have these forward contracts for.
You guys are in this together. Yes. The industry is in this together.
Okay, so talk to me about, a little bit on, as you're seeing the crop being added as rotation and offering forward contracts, can you talk to me about the farmer's perception and how is the transition looking? What does the rotation look like with wheat and barley?
Okay, yeah, well, in Montana, we're mostly a dry land state. We don't have many irrigated acres. We don't have hard data on that, but just from being around for a while, I would say maybe 15 to 20% of our acres are irrigated and the rest are dry land. So we're depending on rainfall to grow the crop. But those irrigated acres are highly sought after by everybody. In my previous career, we aimed at the irrigated acres. We wanted those acres because they were more reliable. So there's tremendous competition for those acres. And so if you're an irrigated farmer, I always say, you are the prettiest girl at the dance because everybody wants your acres. And they're constantly bombarded. Starting about a month ago, actually, one of the, not Anheuser Busch, but another major, Anheuser Busch was the one that came out with a barley contract already for next year for 2023 crop in North Dakota, Montana, and Idaho, which is the three primary barley areas. So they're already out with a very attractive option, higher than last year, probably 15% higher than last year, because they want those acres from those farmers.
Yeah.
And so a farmer will look at all of his options, entertain all those considerations, I guess, and decide what fits in me. And many of our irrigated acres, they're in crop every year because they cannot be set aside. They're just too expensive. So they'll grow something every year. We had people growing malting barley on the same piece of ground 30 years in a row. And you start to see reduced yield, you start to see some disease issues, certainly weed pressure. So finding some kind of a rotation, be it on irrigated or even dry land, benefits in benefits your soil, it benefits disease, insects. Hopefully you can get some different weed controls. But that's one of the things about hemp is we have very few weed controls. So you're dependent on the crop itself to canopy over and handle weeds. And
which means water, on that dry land property,
that's
dependent on rain.
right. Now, if we have good subsoil moisture and a decent spring, I have been very impressed in my 2 years of watching hemp grow. I've been very impressed with the competitiveness of it, how it does handle the weeds. I can't fault it on that regard. But a grower will look at that and say, well, if I have a really weedy field, I probably can't use hemp. I'll probably go to a Liberty Link canola or something that I can spray and handle the weeds. All those things factor into the grower's decision. At the end of the day, growers plant something that'll bring benefit to them. And the biggest benefit, of course, is money. But maybe there's another benefit. Maybe there's, as we talked about, maybe there's, maybe it cleans up a field with some different weeds, or maybe it spreads its price. It doesn't have everything priced into one commodity. But there has to be a benefit for the grower somehow.
When you look at the weed pressure, and I want to say real quick, for those of you that are on LinkedIn, sometimes LinkedIn has a hard time connecting video, and I'm not sure what happens, but it sounds or looks like we may not have video there. If you go over to the YouTube channel, Global Hemp Association on the YouTube, you can see the video, and it looks like there's quite a few of you on. If you're on YouTube, let us know that your video is working okay. But for some reason, LinkedIn every once in a while will disconnect or not connect video. So I apologize. And there's a comment here that it cleans the soil, and I think that that's something that we're seeing a lot of research on is the remediation and what's happening as the plant is absorbing those, heavy metals or toxins, and how much of that is actually being restored in the plant versus digested or passed or whatever happens. It's pretty fascinating to me. Do you have any comments on soil remediation? I know you guys have done, or you've been connected to some of the discussions there.
I will tell you what the growers tell me. They say, we've heard about this for a long time on the carbon issue and cleaning the soil. I think we need to see some hard numbers and some hard data to convince growers to really take that in, because at the end of the day, every grower wants to turn his farm over to somebody in better shape than when they got it. But in those 30 years they're farming, they need to make a living, and they need to buy a tractor where a tire is $3,000. And it's expensive to farm. It's really expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not discounting that, but that is not the grower's primary concern.
Right.
They're making a living.
Got to be a dollar, right?
They're building their 401k.
Yes. Well, and I think that this is something to be, in reality and come back to. And I get checked on this a lot, Dave. When we talk about, all these benefits of hemp and who the audience is that's going to be reading an article or publication that we're talking about promoting hemp to, and they're like, well, that's great, but it doesn't impact the manufacturer, or that pain point really isn't a pain point we're dealing with. And so really figuring out what that niche is and where hemp falls into rotation. And I saw that Tony asked a question again, wondering, has anybody planted hemp after winter wheat in Montana yet? And can you speak about that? What results you found and how it went?
Well, I think the field that probably you guys were on at the summer summit, very likely was winter wheat on the previous crop, and I was very impressed with it. Whether or not that, you'd have to have a pretty wet fall. So let's just say we harvest in August, and you'd have to have a pretty wet fall to really pick up some and winter to pick up some good moisture to seed hemp following that, because hemp should be a pretty deep-rooted crop. Like I said, I'm still learning about hemp. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's an amazing crop, amazing plant. But we have a lot of amazing plants that growers can grow. And for instance, if you plant a legume on the same situation, if you plant a legume on those acres with the high price of fertilizer right now, the legume actually takes way less fertilizer and brings some out of the air and leaves some behind in the soil for you. So there's a benefit there. But yes, I think it could follow winter wheat. And a lot of our dryland acres don't get seeded every year. So certainly, if it was a fallow situation, that'd be probably better, depending on how much moisture we get. We only get 10 to 14 inches of moisture a year in this state.
Right.
So if your soil profile is full, and we are not right now, we have not been the last couple of years since hemp tried to get a foothold. So hemp has had a difficult time. The other thing, we had some hemp baggage that we need to talk about. Several years ago, the CBD hemp folks came to Montana and other places, I'm sure, and promised the moon. And growers signed up. I think we had 50,000 acres of hemp in Montana that year. And it required special equipment to seed it. It required hand roguing of the males when it was after their job was done. And we got zero, well, I won't say zero. 99% of the growers who grew that got crucified, lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And that is a huge hurdle that I know IND has faced at their meetings, getting over that bad taste in growers' mouths. And frankly, the banking industry, they don't, that's a real hurdle. This is much easier to grow. It uses the same equipment. There's no hand roguing involved. So all that is a positive, but that's a big hurdle that people have to get over right now. We need to talk about that. I'm glad we remembered that.
What are some things that are solutions, right? Again, I go back to our farmer and making sure farmers are focused first on being taken care of. And I know IND, in fact, I saw them make a comment here, said that the YouTube video is working great, and thanks for sharing. Thank you guys very much for everything you're doing. Also, up in Montana, when we look at farmers, what do farmers need, as to break that barrier? Is it education? Is it, the grower? Something that I push all the time is going out and shaking the hands of those growers, going out and meeting your farmers, like you said, building that partnership and relationship. Because securing those acres is, right now, hemp is the risk back on the farmer. And, what are you seeing as success that's helping to mitigate that risk from the farmer so much?
I think you mentioned a couple of them. I think that growers need more growing history, more data, and we've mentioned IND, and that's my only experience with the hemp industry is IND in Fort Benton, and I think they have done a wonderful job of building a partnership with growers. They've reached out. To our research centers. Montana has 7 research centers scattered around our state associated with Montana State University. They're getting hemp into several of those plots so growers who at a field day can see it, can see that it grows, can get a few questions answered. So they're part of the package too. They're part of the partnership. They need to get excited about it, and they are. We have a research center northeast of Fort Benton and a research gal up there she's on a scale of 100, she's a 500. And she's amazing. And they have IND has a real good relationship with her, and she's put in some hemp plots last year that were very good. And I mean, that's all part of it. Growers need data to make their decision on and to take to the bank and say, here's why I want to grow this. I've been growing whatever in this field for 9 years in a row, and I need to break the cycle somehow. And they need more data. They need certainly better crop insurance, which I know that IND is working on as well. They need
I think that
they need to remove the hurdles. You shouldn't have to get a background check to grow. You don't have to do that for any other crop. You don't have to pay the state of Montana $800 or $900 or $1,000 to grow chickpeas.
right.
So why would I grow hemp? I mean, if I'm a grower, why would I do that? It's cool. There is that wow factor and the interest. The interest is there, I think.
But it doesn't go out.
We need to have some answers for the growers, and I don't mean to be a big wet blanket on this, because they are getting answers, and we're getting experience, and we're moving forward. And I think IND has done a great job of adapting how they look at growers' contracts and trying to make it workable for them and understanding some of their concerns. So they're doing a good job. They're in it together. You can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to make a comment really quick. Natasha asked, are there any central organizations collecting data on crop rotation results? We are not specifically in our trials, but we are evaluating the pre and post crop. But it is an added data point or data set that I think is very, very valuable that I want to bring up. Is, are you seeing the increased yields after planting hemp? Or, I'm kind of curious, Dave, have you seen it or experienced any of that?
2 years.
Yeah.
Remember, 2 years. I have not seen that, a big wow type of a thing. But I've not seen a negative either. So, I mean, that's the other thing you have to look at when you're trying to be impartial about it. There are some things. Hemp is more work. Certainly, if you do a small grains, you harvest it, you're pretty much done. If you want to, you can turn your stubble back in. On hemp, I think 2 reasons. I don't think you can turn the stubble back in. I think it'll be there forever, and the hemp industry wants the straw. That's a value for them. So there's that. But and then if you are growing it strictly for fiber, you knock it down, you turn it, try to wait for it to ret, bale it. The time factor stretches out a long time. And in our area, growers can't then in that field, they can't spray for fall weeds. They can't graze it. Many of them, I was just over in one of our irrigated areas yesterday, and I was noticing the cattle grazing on the old barley fields from last year. We have a very open fall so far. So there's an opportunity lost. You can't seed it to winter wheat. So there's a lot of these considerations. But having said that, I don't see growers planting the whole farm to hemp. I think it's 15-20% every other year or something of that nature, just to rotate it through and be able to manage the workload and make their own decision on whether or not it's helping them or not.
Sure. There's a really good question from IND I want to bring up. For some reason, I echo when I talk on yours. I hope
that's a great question.
But yeah, how long did it take for other crops, canola, etc., to get established in Montana, and what can we learn from hemp from those about those experiences?
Canola is a good example. It came in with some big names behind it, and big money behind it, and it just didn't quite pan out the way it was supposed to. And I would say it's at least 5 to maybe even 10 years for it to really get a foothold. And the canola folks came in and they had their varieties that they wanted specifically, and they didn't really fit well in the area. And then they went to the research centers and did some more research and started to tweak the varieties a little bit and found something that did work better. So when they kind of came back for their second go around, it was better yielding, better performing in the field, and way better received. But that's a good question. It doesn't happen overnight.
What would you say would be some experiences initially that we could really focus on, or that you're seeing in the industry maybe that we need to be paying attention to, that would avoid the pitfalls that we've seen in some of these other crops or scalability? That's a hard question.
That is a hard question. Because I think we're going about it the right way. I love the summer summit. There's some farmers there. There was end users there. I think everybody has to get on the same page. Know that it's not going to be an explosion of acres overnight, but it's really important for the end buyer, the end user, to know that they need to support the people out in the country and ultimately the farmer to get enough acres in the ground to make your industry viable. Your end users they can't just pick up the phone once a year and say, I'd like to buy this, because it won't be there. They need to be involved today for next year's production.
I think that this is a good question. That these guys in Hawaii have done a great job and have already produced a pretty good crop and are looking to scale. And so we've had some discussions. And so I think this kind of ties into, the suggestion both on the farm side and processor side, developing that partnership. But would you suggest to a farmer that it would be a good decision to partner with the processor company to guarantee their crops are to be purchased?
Yes, but I would almost turn that around. I think it's a good idea for the processor to try to partner with farmers, because that's where the driving link has to go. If you're processing hemp, you need hemp. If you're farming, you can grow lots of other crops. So I think it has to come from the end user down. And I've said that many times. And I mean, it worked. In the malting barley business, we had to buy half of the barley crop in the United States every year, and it worked. And they're still doing that, and so is 10 or 12 other crops.
That's great. So what other advice would you have? What other feedback from what you've seen in this industry? What advice can you give to these processors to really, secure those contracts and develop the acres and the relationships that are necessary?
I guess just get involved. Everybody who's making something out of hemp buys it from somebody. Talk to that somebody. Find out what they can do to maybe remove some of these hurdles, be it lobbying, be it money for research, be it coming out and meeting the growers. That goes a long ways. If a grower knows that this field or whatever they're growing is in this product, that grower will become your little mini salesman. I mean, if he's growing hemp and he can point to a vest down at North 40 and say that very likely came from my field, he'll be talking to people at the basketball games and Little League and at the church social. So just the end users need to get involved and support the processors, and realize that some years, if you're in a contracting program, And when you're looking ahead for 1 year, it helps you budget. It helps the grower budget. Now, come the following year, and maybe not in hemp, but because it's such a small crop, but you may be a penny or two too high in your contract price. But maybe the next year you're a penny or two too low in your contract price compared to the average. It's an average price. You can't get so hung up on that you don't support the industry.
Right.
You need a contract program. It takes out the peaks and valleys, but they need to be part of it. They need to be in the game.
Absolutely. There's a couple of questions that are coming in. One is there crop data available from Rodell Research related to before and after crop productivity? And I'm going to turn this, and I don't know if you know this answer, but Tony, who's been also on YouTube, is with Rodell and may be able to answer that question as well.
I don't have any data, but I would love to see it.
Yeah.
All of mine is driving by and getting out and kicking dirt and asking the grower, what do you think?
Well, that's that's who's collecting our data, our farmers. So like you said, getting into the dirt and talking with the farmers, and I'm curious like you, and in different regions, each region has a different set of problems, and so understanding we're speaking specifically to the Northwest, right? The very Northwest, north of the U.S. But yeah, I saw Tony had a question. I don't know if you know this. Have Canadians tried to bring in lentils? And are there potential parallels there with grain hemp?
I don't know if they brought it in. They certainly could. I know that our Montana is right on the Canadian border, and we transfer grain back and forth all the time. So I would think if there's the better lentil market down here, yeah. As a matter of fact, I would be thinking about who's up on the northern border, and I would expect the answer to that is yes, that they have brought that in. Just knowing a couple of the companies that are up there and what they specialize in.
That's a good question, though, and I think that this is where understanding the parallels and what's working and what's not working, what crops align, have similar practices. I think that that's what we're trying to figure out. And so I'm always interested, especially next to wheat versus alfalfa versus, down in California where Tony is, or Florida where there's other processing happening. They're very different crop systems. Where do you see, when we talk about scalability and dry crop, what about the transition or the trend that is really hot around regenerative and moving to regenerative practices and adding crops to rotations? Are you seeing that that's a real value add when securing acres for industrial hemp, or is that really not a conversation in a lot of the big ag discussions?
I can honestly say that I don't think I've had any of the guys that I've talked to, which is just a handful again, mention that. So a good topic if you had at a convention, and if you're at a grower convention, you could be asking growers that sort of thing. That's the other thing, maybe. That's how you reach out to growers. Every state, I'm sure, has their grower conventions of whatever. And probably many of these people trying to get hemp produced are at those conventions. And it's expensive.
Yeah.
Help your boots on the ground people reach out. Be it come to the convention and yourself, be part of the booth. Help them with some of the expenses. I mean, it's not only just the money, it's 2-3 days out of your schedule. And most people don't wake up on Tuesday morning and say, gee, I don't have anything to do today. So,
Or more importantly, they're not like, hey, I want to go stand at a trade show.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, right? It's about the education, and there's a lot of information that you got to get out. And again, it goes back to relationship focused, right? Who are we talking to, and meeting those people that we're trying to do business with where they're at. And reality is, like, And I said this also, not just from the farming perspective, but also the construction and building industry, right? Where are we trying to get our product into, and where are we trying to pull our product from? And building that supply chain means shaking their hands and building that trust, especially like you said, when we're overcoming the challenges from the CBD industry, where we were promised the world and very under delivered, right?
Yeah.
And I bet it's hard to hear, right? I bet it's frustrating as you're out talking to farmers, hearing that, because you see one perspective that really is the reality of what's happening, where industry, opportunity is compared to what's been sold.
That's right. I've got growers that I've done business with for a lot of years. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to put a number on it, because then you'll know how old I am, and I'm old. But for a lot of years, and in watching the hemp in the area and the field plots, I see people that I think that hemp would be a real good fit, and you can't get them to even if you buy them a beer, they'll turn down a free beer because they don't want to hear it, because they have that CBD history in their minds. So but that is getting broke down. IND has done a really good job of working with growers, being patient, listening to them, addressing their concerns, evolving their contracts, trying to find varieties that fit better and making sure they fit better. Nobody wants to contract a headache. So the buyer doesn't and the grower doesn't. It has to fit. And so I think they've done a really good job of relating to the growers and finding out what works. And I'm sure other folks, I only have one company's experience that I've been watching, but I'm sure the other folks are doing the same thing.
Well, and I think that this speaks, though, to in conferences where I have not seen IND, there is conversation often had about how they're leading the way in a number of different areas and different sectors. Good. Right. And so it's really rewarding to hear also from the farm perspective, that it's creating an opportunity, or that they're really working to create the opportunity from both the farm and the market side. And I think that this goes back to rising tides raises all boats, and we have to be able to prevent as many black eyes as possible, or false truths, because it affects everybody later on, right? And so I do give credit back there also to IND and to the team and the things that they have done, the support that they've given. They've also given us an immense amount of support for our fiber trials, which I also think, pay a lot to this third-party data set that allows us to give information back to farmers that is non-biased, that isn't coming from salesmen or the processors that are trying to push acres also. And I don't even want to say push acres, but we all have a goal and an agenda. And really, I think that, like you said, the data and availability of data. I saw Tasha on here also said that we need to create a digital platform that can collect that data. They do it in the coffee industry as well. But then GHA, just so you guys know, on a lot of this data, we're looking for platforms to collect and distribute. I did just recently apply for a grant where hopefully we'll be able to do that. Have a platform where you can log in and compare, trial data, farm data, map out who's who. I have mapped out the processors. The farmers are a little bit trickier, but definitely something that we should do and can put onto a map. So I have a platform idea for it, Tasha. I'd love to talk to you about it. But of course, it all comes down to funding for the industry and where the industry actually is versus where we need to go, and who are going to be those partners to also develop the industry. And it can't just be IND Hemp, right? It's got to be all of the processors and all the farmers coming together. Like at the Summer Summit, we talked about a group, that really helps to lead the charge on contracts and building opportunities. I think that has to be a team support, and we've got to have organizations that are not just starting in the industry, but are developed like IND Hemp that can come together and collaborate. And so I'll speak that as well, Dave, and put that out there, that I really encourage you guys to, rise the tides and come together to collaborate and, really lean into what's working, especially, like what we're seeing, not just in the business sector, but the policy side also in Montana. And the push to separate the fiber and grain from the cannabinoid production, because it's ridiculous. Somebody should be paying $1,000 to grow hemp, and that's just for the licensing. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and you touched on the research, and in my experience, when we had and Anheuser Busch had a mammoth barley breeding program.
Yeah.
And we'd come up with different barley varieties and try to contract them with the grower and say, well, this one's better for you, and here's why it yields this, or it's 3 days earlier in maturity, or whatever. But yet, we had a vested interest in getting them to grow that particular variety. So if we could get those very same varieties into the non-biased MSU's test plots in Montana, or whatever state you're listening from, that data farmers listen to or pay attention to better, because there's no vested interest in there. Nobody's trying to sell something, I guess, sell a variety. So funding for your various state institutions or is huge. You just need to get it in front of the farmers so they can touch it, feel it, see it, look at the data, and feel good about it, to answer those questions.
Yes. Well, and I think that's just it, right? I think it also brings some validity to the research when you have state institutions also behind it, right? I think there's benefits to both, right? I also look at some of our trial data I am so proud of. If those of you who have not seen it or seen some of the pictures that we've put together, I've been traveling quite a bit and have seen a number of different trials and different research facilities lately, and I'm mind blown by the quality of work that our team was able to pull off and put together. And I think that speaks to the way and where and how data is collected, right? And so keeping that in mind, that the type of information we're comparing, and I say this all the time, is there is a huge need for on-farm trials that are ran by farmers.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's also a huge value to farm trials or for trial data being collected by research professionals, right? Because that's what they do. And that as much as the farm trial is beneficial, when we're looking at mitigating or reducing variabilities, to look at real impact of, say, inputs or disease pressure or water, if the farm line breaks or water line breaks on the farm, you better bet that farmer's fixing that water line, not collecting the data, right? And so we want to be able to, really, really focus on the separation of the two types of data that we're collecting and the value to both. And the need now to take the baseline data onto farm scale, so we can say, what works at big scale is not always what works at proof of concept.
Right.
And yeah. Do you have any suggestions, Dave, then on next steps for the industry for both processors, businesses looking to get into the industry? What can we really take away when we're looking at scaling this hemp industry into traditional row crops and agriculture?
I guess and I've said it several times, everybody needs to be in this thing together. They need the end user should be out in the fields, meeting those growers. I'll tell you a plus that I hear from lots of growers about IND. They can go to Fort Benton, Montana, and talk to the boss, talk to the decision maker. And if they don't like something in the previous arrangement or contract, they can say, here's what I don't like about it, and they listen. Now, sometimes you can't I mean, the farmer would just like you to say, give me a blank check and I'll fill it in, let you know what it is. Now, that doesn't work in business. We know that. But they are responsive, and they are not a multi-zillion dollar conglomerate that makes a decision in Belgium, or for instance.
Right.
So that is a real plus. And I think the whole industry is like that. I mean, your industry is just getting rolling and wanting to get a lot bigger. And so the decision makers can talk to the growers and vice versa. And I think that's a real plus. And that's probably my key. You need impartial data. So everybody needs to pitch in and get that data available to the farmer, publish. I guess that would, and just, the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's what you guys are trying to do, is you're trying to eat that elephant. So it's going to be slow. It's not going to be a fireworks type of a thing. You got lots of competition, but I don't know why it can't do quite well. The crops I've seen growing do quite well. So I'm pleased with that, and I think the farmers are pleased with that. All the things we've talked about are fixable.
Yeah.
And if the grower understands it going in, it should do well.
Real quick, I want to address some of the wins that you've seen for farmers that have been growing hemp. But before, I want to give props back to I&D as you talk about their business model and what they're doing for the industry. I really, non-biased, third party, I give credit where credit is due, and really back to their farm and their involvement at the farm. Ben and his team are fabulous also. Like you said, sitting down at the summit and the opportunity that people had to sit down with Ken and Morgan one-on-one and Julie one-on-one, it was awesome. And so, I second what you said, and I do encourage, for those of you that don't know their business model or know what they're doing, to pay attention and get to know. More importantly, like I said, it rises all tides, and we've got to be able to rise that standard. So back real quick, we've got just a couple minutes, but what are some of those wins that we've seen for the farmers that have grown hemp? What is working for them?
One thing is that farmers should not grow one crop every year, 100% of their acres. And in my background, I had growers doing that. And so their fortunes of the farm, I guess, if you will, rose and fell with whatever my company decided to do on the price or the weather factors. We had years where it rained at the wrong time and growers could not deliver any of their crop. And that was pretty devastating. And growing up in that area and knowing those people for, I'm not saying how many years, knowing those people, you were devastated right along with them. But so I think hemp, having a crop diversity of some sort of crop, you're spreading your risk a little bit. You don't have all your eggs in one basket. I think that's a real plus for hemp. It's cool. It's great. It's great to see growing along the field, alongside of the road. So
I think that plays a huge role. I also, I know you guys are mostly on dry land, but what about the conversation, or do you hear conversation about water, because of the shortage and because of the drought tolerance that hemp has? Are you seeing it play into conversation because of water or drought?
Ben would be a lot better one to handle that question than me, but we have been so dry on our dry land for the last 2 years, about the time when I&D came in and tried to get this thing kick-started. So they have had not only the normal challenges, they've had normal challenges times 10, probably, just because of the lack of moisture. Hemp should be able to find water easier than some of our other crops. I can't say in my little tiny experience that it has been dramatically one way or the other, but I'm not saying it wasn't either. I just don't know. like I said, that field outside of Fort Benton, I was really pleased with that dryland field out there in that location. And the lack of weeds, how the hemp had competed against the weeds and took care of them. I was extremely pleased on that, and I'm waiting to hear how it yielded and what the grower thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, I would love
Everything's so new. Everything's just so new, at least to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm with you. Whatever we can do to help get data to our farmers and information so that people can make those, better business decisions, and so that we can start getting better insurance and start getting better protection and banking. Because like you said, a lot of that is based on historical data, right? And so we've got to be able to have years of data and well collected data. That becomes really valuable. So Dave, I really appreciate your time, appreciate everything that you're doing, everything that you're doing to support the industry. I'm really excited to hear the interest and what you're working on, especially being in, the contracting side of other specialty crops and realizing the value to the rotation or adding that crop to the rotation. So thanks again for everything you do. Any last few words before we sign off?
No, I think it's an exciting industry. I'm pleased it's here. It's a fun crop. I think growers will certainly give it a shot as long as it looks competitive and they have a little data to base their decision on. I'm looking forward to watching it grow. And I think our IND is doing a great job here of working with the growers, and I think people should take that to heart. You can't just sign them on the dotted line and walk away. You need to give them help during the course of the year and the rest of the year too, even after harvest. So build a partnership.
And like you said, know that it's competitive, right? This is a very, very competitive space. And so if there is not a relationship with people, it is very easy to come in and undercut for a small price or a small difference. Because there is not that relationship.
Right.
And I think I've heard this, right, is the relationships really are IP of our industry right now. And so building those relationships becomes so valuable. It is downpouring rain outside. I really wanted to touch on a comment that was said earlier by Tim. And Tim, thanks so much for your comments today. For those that I've missed, I will get back to and try to answer. But we're still held to a 15-day harvest window in Ohio that applies to fiber and grain hemp crops in addition to flour. I have a question, and I've heard this. I think I was talking to Ken about it, about the term harvest, right? When you cut the crop versus remove the crop from the field. In the hemp industry, is harvest the same as when we harvest alfalfa or wheat or hay? Is, if I cut a crop of alfalfa and let it dry in the field, am I harvesting it at the time of cutting it?
I would guess harvest is when you pick up whatever pays you money. So I'm thinking if it's an alfalfa, it's when you bale it and get it in the stack. I guess that's an interesting comment. I've never heard of that. Obviously, they have more harvest moisture than we do to worry about.
Well, and I think too, this requires with the state, right, being tested at a certain, you have to have it tested, and then you have to have the crop off the field. I'm just curious if when I harvest a hemp field for a fiber field, and I cut the crop at that time, is it harvesting, or when I'm removing it, is it that time that I'm harvesting? And so
I don't know.
In other ag, right, like you said, when I'm harvesting my alfalfa is when I'm taking it off of the field, not when I'm cutting it from the field.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's not quite apples to apples, because we're concerned about the testability or whatever you want to call it. I don't have the answer to that, but we've had hemp that's been down probably close to a month on the ground, fiber hemp.
Right.
because we've been abnormally dry and we're kind of waiting for it to ret, and it won't ret unless it gets a little moisture and yada yada. So.
Right. And so I think that definition may also be something that needs to be addressed, or maybe is being addressed by the team at IND is, when are we harvesting the crop, and what does harvest mean, to a farmer versus especially somebody that's harvesting or used to harvesting an alfalfa or.
Right. Yeah. I can't answer that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll bring that up. I'll talk to Ken about it again. I think it was Ken that I was talking to is, in that definition of harvest, what does that look like for fiber? So anyways, well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate your time. We've gone just over an hour. Everybody else, I appreciate everything that you're doing. If there's any topics you guys are looking to dive into, or any professionals or companies that you'd like to hear from, please send me a memo. My email is mandy@globalhempassociation.org. You can also find us on social media channels, and our team will definitely get the message over to me, but please send me the info. And then I'll reach out. Alex, I saw your message also about the ASTM hemp standardization, and so I'd love to connect about that. Anyways, Dave, thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and thanks everybody for chiming in. We'll see you next time.
Right. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks very much.